to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings and welcome back to another edition of the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you today on this December 22nd, 2024. And again, I do appreciate any support you do give me for this show. So if you like what you see and hear on this program, by all means, hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. Hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And of course, if you are following me on any other form of social media, by all means, give me a like and a follow there. Today's show, I am featuring an interview with Chris Boltendahl from the band Gravedigger, one of my favorite bands of all time. And, you know, I'm really excited to talk to Chris. I was really excited to be able to speak to him. Chris has come on my show off and on for almost 27 years now. Hard to believe it's been that long, but Gravedigger's celebrating their 45th anniversary in 2025. They have a new album coming out January 17th, 2025 called Bone Collector, which I think is a fantastic album, and I will be reviewing that album very shortly. But for those of you that know me or don't know me, there are four bands from the German heavy metal scene that have had just a huge impact on me. And all four of those bands originated on Noise Records. You know, obviously, it's Halloween, it's Gravedigger, it's Rage, and Running Wild. I mean, that's like the big four of German power metal on Noise Records. Now, I do love a lot of other German heavy metal bands that came after them, you know, like Blind Guardian and Iron Savior and bands like that. But those four bands, Gravedigger, Halloween, Running Wild, and Rage, all four of those bands have had a tremendous impact on me. They are all still around making great records, and it's been a blast. I mean, ending the year off with Halloween at the beginning of the month, and now the last interview of the year with Chris Boltendahl from Gravedigger. It's just a fantastic end to the year, and the new album Bone Collector that Gravedigger is putting out January 17th, which it is available for pre-order on Gravedigger's website. It's a fantastic record. So with that being said, not going to talk any further except with Chris Boltendahl from Gravedigger, and here is the interview with myself and Chris. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, back to the Metal Command Podcast. Tony here with you. And it seems I end the year off with my favorite German heavy metal bands. Last year, last year it was with Scanner. And then, of course, at Halloween on a couple weeks ago. Now I have Chris Boltendahl from Gravedigger, one of my favorite, probably top 25 heavy metal bands of all time. New album called Bone Collector, which I think is really, really good. And it's great to have you back, sir.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, so let's talk about this record. So I've had some time to listen to it over the last 2 or 3 days, and it's just, there's something different about this album compared to the last album. I'd like to think that getting a new guitar player may have something to do with that, but overall, I mean, the album's just straight ahead heavy, in your face, and in my opinion, one of the heaviest albums you've ever done. And let's talk about this record, man. I mean, it's been a while since you had a record out, like an actual, you know, Gravedigger album. Let's talk about Bone Collector.
Yeah, when Toby Kersting joined the band, something changed, you know. As usual, if a new guitar player, a new member will join the band, something happened. And with Toby Kersting, he's a really old school heavy metal fan, you know. He loves Running Wild, he loves Halloween, he loves Gravedigger, and he's an awesome guitar player. But on the other side, he's an awesome fan, you know. He has a huge collection of records at home, CDs, vinyls. And yeah, as you know, I did my solo project with him together with Chris Boltendahl Steelhammer. And when Axel left the band, it was, for me, it was a logical thing that Toby will join the band. So with Toby, we are able to capture some spirit from the 80s back to the band, you know. And that was very important for me, because when we started in the 80s, it was all what we did with Gravedigger was very simple, you know. If you listen to a Heavy Metal Breakdown or Witch Hunter, it's a simple song structure, simple lyrics, everything was really simple. And over the years, we are more connected to this concept CDs, which are fine, definitely. Tunes of War, Excalibur, or also the previous one, Symbol of Eternity, all that good. But to bring back this old spirit, that was totally important for me. And
Yeah.
I think that we are nearly reached this goal to let the people feel what's Gravedigger, the essential of Gravedigger, you know?
Yeah, sure. So, what's crazy is that you're going to be celebrating your 45th anniversary. So we'll talk a little bit of history here after we get done with the record, but 45 years. So, which means next year you'll be celebrating your 45th year. You started this band in 1980. Does it seem like a long time ago? Because that's a pretty long time for a band to be around. Did you ever think you'd still be around doing this when you started out?
No, never, because when I started the band, I was 18 years old. And I thought with all the alcohol and smoking weed and all these fucking drugs, I'm dead with 30.
Yeah.
And then I was 30 and I was still alive. And then I was 35. And with 38, I stopped drinking and smoking and all these things. Yeah. And I'm really healthy these days. And yeah, I'm looking into the future.
Yeah.
This year was something like a time journey for me, because in October I did a home story, my first home story with a German metal magazine, Metal Hammer, and we went to my hometown. It's 100 miles from here away, from Cologne, and we visited my father in my home house, you know. And my father is now 96, and he explained it to the Metal Hammer guy. And then we moved to all these pubs where Gravedigger was still alive in the 80s, and it was great. And so I'm after 45 years now, more or less, I went back to all this where all the things started. Also, the first rehearsal room where we founded Gravedigger and all this. That was emotional, you know.
Sure. Yeah, it's just, it's crazy because I think when you look back at where you guys came from, if you look back, I mean, you were one of the first, I believe, one of the first Noise record signings way back when. And, it's interesting when you look back at all the bands on Noise, most of them, like the ones that have, been around a while, like Gravedigger or Rage, or, you mentioned Running Wild, Halloween, all these bands, Creator's another one, all these bands are still around. And back then it was a much different time because this music was still kind of, how shall we put it? Kind of not in its infancy, but it was still developing, as we might want to say. And what was that like for you guys back then, being one of those bands, pioneering bands in the metal scene, especially in Europe? Because I've always looked at Noise as like the European version of what Metal Blade was here in the United States. And what was that like for you guys back then, really coming up with all those bands and basically forming that metal scene, kind of coming after Accept and Scorpions, where, you're kind of like your predecessors?
I think that Gravedigger and Running Wild are more or less the second wave of German heavy metal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The first wave, I think it's Accept and Scorpions. But then in the beginning of the 80s, all these bands coming up, like Gravedigger, like Rage, like Running Wild, Halloween coming up. And if that's funny that all these bands, the original bands from the 80s, are more or less still alive, doing records, doing tours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all these bands have created a signature sound, you know, for the German metal scene. Halloween with this, oh,
Yeah,
is more or less this children melodies that is not negative, but very easy to sing with. Or Rage, Running Wild, Gravedigger with this typical German heavy metal approach, you know, and Creator, more or less, or Sodom, also the first thrash bands coming up from this area, this Ruhrgebiet area, we call it. And all these bands have a signature sound where a lot of bands which are coming up after that orientated their own style, and
Sure.
follow the trademarks of these bands, and that is the reason why we're still alive. We never had this success like a Sabaton or Powerwolf,
Yeah.
all these newer bands. But we are still alive. I can feed my family from that, and that is the most important thing. And
Sure.
we make records, and we are happy.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out whether you guys or Rage had more albums out. Because it seems like, I mean, how many records do you have out now? I mean, it's crazy to think about, because when I ended up getting into the band, it was 1997. Right around when Tunes of War came out. So I mean, you think about that, it seems like a week ago, but it's really been like 26, 27 years ago, which is kind of hard for me to think about. But you guys were basically coming back. But you mentioned Tobias coming into the band, and I've noticed, I remember when Manny came into the band, I remember when Axel came into the band, and you could always get a feel of the new person. Like, you could feel a change. Not saying the change was bad, but you could feel a change. And when those guys came in, I remember when Manny came in, the first album he played on, which was basically a self-titled album. That album blew me out of the water. And when you look for these guys, and when you ask these guys to join the band, what was it about them that you knew they would add something to this band and really kind of improve things for you?
I think that when Manny joined the band, it was a little bit more of this progressive stuff. He was playing with Rage,
Yeah.
and the big difference was that he more or less had to learn this old school stuff, And I always wanted to do an album like the old Black Sabbath or the Osbourne stuff, and that was more or less a target when Manny joined the band. That we did this one with the greatest self-titled album. When Axel joined the band, we thought about doing a second part of Tunes of War, and we created this one with the Clans Will Rise Again. And when Tobias now joined the band, we said, oh, wow, we are fucking old school again. So he can play all this stuff, and he loves it, because you can listen to this album that Tobias is still loving the stuff he's playing, and it needed a couple of time to find out the right sounds of the bass, of the drums, and also of the guitars, to find the signature sound from Gravedigger again. I think that is something we left a bit in the last 10 years. The signature sound we created, and that was a main target. And that everybody in the band said, okay, let's go back to this sound, not sound like a heavy metal breakdown album, but the spirit of this first album should be in the new one. And we worked a lot on that, and it came naturally that it sounds like the older albums, but with a timeless sound, and it rocked.
Yeah. So one of the things I did notice is that it was more straight ahead, a little bit more straightforward. You didn't have a lot of the epic choirs, and you didn't really do this big concept record, which you are known for. It was more, I don't want to say stripped down, but it's a much heavier record to me. Like when The Rich, the Poor, the Dying came on. I'll give you an example. When I heard that song, I'm like, this is, I was automatically like, this is going to be a much different record. And the production, I just think everything, the songwriting and the production compared to the last one, which the last album I thought was pretty good, I thought were better, on this new one. In all seriousness, I was not kind of expecting the record to sound like this, and that's kind of why I'm like, man, I'm listening to these riffs this guy's playing, and it's like, damn.
Yeah. Yeah, we did a lot of different things before we started with writing of the songs.
Mm-hmm.
We made some experiments, and we said, okay, this is not Gravedigger. This is old school, but we will form it into a Gravedigger song. And it was so much fun to it's like to write a song, and the lyrics are like a computer game, like Tetris. You put brick by brick
Yeah.
to the right place. And when it all come together, and we also had this bass guitar sound from Jens, and I think you never heard the bass so loud like on this album.
Right.
We make some rehearsals with the sound also, and everybody's happy also with his own sound and with a complete sound. And I think this new album has pure energy. I
Yeah.
never expect that from guys who are near to the retirement. So
Yeah. Well, it doesn't
it's
seem like the vibe I get from a lot of these bands, guys like yourself, and it's like you're not even thinking about retirement. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, and you're 45 years in, and it's like I'm just going to keep going on like my predecessors did. That's pretty much that's pretty much what it is. It's just like everybody seems so laid back and mellow, and they're just like, I'm just going to keep continuing. They're looking at the future. They're not looking at retiring. And I think I noticed that with you. I noticed that with a lot of your contemporaries that have come on the show. They're not thinking about that. They just want to keep pushing forward. And especially now, we're in kind of a very, very bad time, for the music business, because there's a lot of obstacles, touring costs and stuff like that. But you just still keep going. I think it's great.
Yeah, we have nearly 40 shows for next year so far. I think that some shows will appear more than next year.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, I think to keep this energy is a lot for this kind of music. When I grew up, I was 12 years old, and I saw a Deep Purple cover band in school. And from this time on, I wanted to be a rock star, and that was my dream. When I look at my son, he's 18 years old now. He's a guitar player and singer, brilliant guitar player with a really good tone and feeling and everything. And he said to me, "Hey, Dad, in 10 years, I want to be a rock star." And I said, "Hey, live your dream, my friend."
Yeah.
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 And you have to follow that. Yeah. And he's rehearsing a lot of time during the day, and singing, and he loves what he's doing. And for me, it's much better than he's on the street singing some fucking rap and taking drugs, and he loves this kind of music. He's still in classic rock. His favorite bands are Rush, Deep Purple,
Mm-hmm.
and he will join me for 3 shows next year on stage, singing with me Rebellion. And I can't be prouder than that my son will join me on stage, so. And
Yeah.
the essential thing to keep the energy, also when you are an older guy, it's the love for what you do,
Yeah.
And we are planning now for 2027, the next album and tour, and we have a lot of plans.
Yeah, it's funny. The next generation of people, next generation of kids, of people in these bands playing shows, and then you're playing on stage with your dad, right? I had this. I remember I had this conversation with Kai Hansen about his son, and they would go on stage, and I remember asking him. I said, I think your son's band is really good. And he looked at me. He's like, he's a better guitar player than I am. And that took for someone like him to admit that is even though for as good as he is, it's just funny now his son is playing, and now your son's playing. It'd be interesting if he ends up in a band and then suddenly I'm interviewing him on my show, so I just think it's really cool though, that, kids are, your kids and there's other musicians out there are really getting into this stuff.
Yeah, it keeps going. It's a new generation, and if Kai said that his son is a better guitar player, they have a new approach to learning guitar, and much better teachers than we had, because we are more or less self educated more as a musician. I never had any vocal lessons or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
So my son had good teachers, uh, but he's not very technical player, you know. But he has such a good feeling when
Yeah.
he's playing, and I said, "Hey, this is something I really love. Not you know, like Yngwie Malmsteen or Steve Vai or something, but more or less like an old Richie Blackmore or Jimmy Page. This kind of music he's playing. So we are rescued because if this generation will come up and yeah, there's nothing to add.
Yeah. My favorite German guitar player growing up was Uli Roth. I thought
Yeah,
that guy, I saw him play live here not long ago, and I'm like, man, this guy's like crazy, you know. And
yeah,
then
his guy is a living guitar, you know. So his body and the guitar are nearly the same, you know.
so one of the things you've done recently over the last I'd like to say few albums now is you took on the role of producing the albums and then mixing them, obviously. And what prompted you to want to do that?
Corona.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, during the Corona time, yeah, we're sitting at home with nothing to do, you know, only perhaps writing songs, making lyrics, but no live shows and no touring, nothing. So I say to myself, okay, I will exercise and learn a lot, learning by doing. And I bought some stuff and I developed this stuff, and now I have my own studio, and I produced other bands. So it was, yeah, since 2020, I'm able to record and mix, mastering my own stuff, and that gives me a lot of new opportunities. You know, that
Yeah.
I have much more time. If you book a studio, you are limited. You have a limited amount of money you can spend there. So for 3-4 weeks, then it's over. Your money is gone, and all is fixed. Then, if you leave the studio, you have a fixed, yeah, amount of money you're left there, and on the other side, your production is through. And now we can do that and that, and we can change things till the mastering, and that is awesome, and gives us a lot of opportunities to create music.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how have you dealt with things like the cost of touring going up? You know, how is it more difficult to book shows? Are promoters a lot less likely to give money or to put money up for shows? Or maybe for somebody like you, you've been around so long, they already kind of know what they're going to get. And then, you know, it's not that difficult for you. But, you know, as far as the business end goes, you know, talk about the cost of transporting everything and then getting shows booked, et cetera, et cetera. You know, has any of that stuff been difficult for you? And if you have faced obstacles with that, what have you done to sort of adapt to what's going on now?
At first, I have the advantage that I have a crew which is more or less only working for Gravedigger.
Mm-hmm.
They have the daily jobs, and then they will be on tour with the band. So these costs are not increased so much, you know. But perhaps for a nightliner, you have to pay so much money now. It's a double, you know,
Yeah.
and other costs are like for T-shirts and all this stuff that increased a lot, you know. So yeah, we are in a comfort zone with Gravedigger because we are booked by other promoters for festivals.
Yeah.
Because the band is it's a live party band. Also, they know that we are celebrating really cool heavy metal on stage. So we are in a comfort zone. But for many more artists, which are a little bit smaller than Gravedigger, this is really hard to survive, to find possibilities to for live shows and everything. Nobody will give you money, or that is really hard. But we have booked the tour for January, and we have really good pre-sales because we have a good support band with Victory. and we have really good pre-sales so far. So yeah, we are looking really optimistic to the future,
Yeah.
but it is not normal, you know.
Yeah. Getting a good pre-sale is always good because that always seems to be one of the most difficult things because people aren't sure how they're going to spend their money and they kind of wait till the last minute. You don't know. Let's say you book a place that, let's say it holds 800 people. You might have 200 tickets sold, and then all of a sudden you get this walk up. You got to take that. I mean, people have to take that risk, right? And when you have good pre-sales, it's always, you usually say, okay, probably going to sell this show out or at least mostly fill the room. And
Yeah.
has that always been something that, has that something you've ever been worried about? Or you just pretty much know, look, people know who we are. They come see us. You're not as worried about it as, say, a newer band that, may not have been around for may have only been around for 5 years.
I think pre-sales are really important nowadays. You know that the promoters also can figure out how many people will come. Yeah, calculating the costs and their income. But there are also many bands which can't going on tour. Also, bigger bands with bigger productions. They have less pre-sales, so they cancel at least the tours and everything.
Yeah.
So it's something like a risk to book a tour, you know, a tour on your own costs. For example, we booked more or less with an agent in the US a tour for next year, but this guy booked a lot of shows, but he didn't came up with some fees, you know. So at the end, it looks that the fees so low that we can't get the costs in at the end, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the bad thing is we are confirmed for festivals like Hell Heroes and 2 Minutes to Tulsa, and in between there are a lot of shows. And then they said to me, "Okay, you can go with a camper, and you have to book hotels." And I said, "Hey, motherfucker, I'm 63 years old. How should I drive with a camper through the US, you know, and a daily distance of 600, 800 miles?"
Yeah.
Yeah, who should pay that? And also for the visa costs, you know, you have now, if you are going for a working visa in the US, you have to pay $2,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that are costs which kill you in the end. And if you have 100, 150 people each show, that is what was the expectation I have. You know, if I go not with Blind Guardian on my own, like a band with a band like Satan, that was a co-headliner thing with Satan. In a good way, perhaps we get 300 people, but you know, the US market is so hard also to play on that. My expectation was between 100 and 150 people, and with that you can't finance this kind of touring with flights, with working visas, with backline rental, and all this stuff. So no chance. We have to cancel it.
Yeah. The US is difficult because majority of the population lives on the eastern half of the country, and you have places like New York, Chicago. You have these big cities, but then when you have to go out west to get to California, you usually got to find one or two shows you're going to play on the way out, and usually those shows are probably have the least amount of attendance because they're usually in a place like you just aren't expecting to play, but you're doing it as kind of to bridge the gap, as we say. So I know that's difficult, and you mentioned something that I've talked about before. You mentioned that obviously in the US being a hard market, and it's weird because when I see Gravedigger, or I see, when I think about Rage, for example, who came to Canada, they didn't come here, or Halloween, even for that matter. I mean, they don't, everyone, all of you guys do not have the audience here that you do everywhere else in the world. And, what do you think? Why do you think that is? Why do you think it was so tough for bands like yourself, except it's Scorpions obviously made it here, but I think with the Scorpions, it took probably 4 records on a major label to really invest in them to even get people to know who they were, right? So why do you think it is that a lot of the bands that you came up with, just for whatever reason, don't break the market here, or at least play to the audiences they have everywhere else?
I think that is if you want to break the market, you have to invest a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
to build up step by step, yeah, to increase from tour to tour the amount of people coming to the shows. And like Sabaton, for example, they invest a lot of money for the touring in the US because they
Yeah.
want to break the US market. You know, on tour with Judas Priest, on tour with that band, on tour with that band, you know. And at the end, when they play now, they have 2,000, 3,000 people, which is a good amount of people. But you have to put the money you earn here in the European market to invest it in the US market. And nowadays, we are a band, we are too old,
Yeah.
you know. We say the train is running without us, you know. So to invest the money, I don't have the money to invest it in the US to build up a solid fan base there, you know.
Yeah.
So the only possibility we have is to jump on a track with a more like we did with Blind Guardian in 2015 and 16. So that is the only possibility we have, and to tour the market by our own is definitely not possible.
Yeah, I remember when you came. I'm wearing one of the shirts from that.
Yeah, I know. I saw that.
Yeah, and
That is from the first tour.
yeah, and it's funny because I remember when you guys played and opened for Blind Guardian here in Cleveland, and I remember looking, and I thought to myself, what kind of fan base does Gravedigger have here? And I remember walking into the venue, and I must have saw about 20 guys with kilts on, Gravedigger shirts, and I'm like, I thought that was cool because it's so hard for bands from Europe to really gauge their fan base here, to really figure out, you sometimes some cities you'll go to and you'll be shocked that, oh my God, I can't believe I have this many fans here. Or, it just, I was not expecting that, when I ended up getting there. I figured, you're going to be opening for Blind Guardian. People are going to get to know who you are here in the States because it's not like you come here all the time. And I was surprised at the amount of people that I saw people I saw one guy, he was in full-fledged kill. He had a Gravedigger Tunes of War shirt on. I saw him walking right in walking into the venue, and it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy, and it was pretty cool. It was a really good show, actually. But I had never, seeing you live in this here, I was actually like, man, I never thought this would ever happen, but it did. And I thought you guys sounded great on that tour, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that is the only thing we can do to wait perhaps for another great band who's touring the US with us. It was really fun because it was so comfortable for us to tour with Blind Guardian. The first tour was amazing. And the second was, we had less people because we played same cities. And I remember a show I think it was in South Carolina, in Wilmington. There were 110 people or something there. There was it was a C or a D market, and
yeah,
it was crazy. But I think we are now too old to jump in this market to build up a solid fan base. I think we have a solid fan base, but this base is not so huge that Gravedigger can play on their own there, So we are concentrating ourselves to South America because there's a huge fan base, and also in Europe. So Russia is gone because we also were really popular in Russia and the Ukraine. So, but for the reasons it's not possible to play there. But I'm happy with it,
Yeah.
I also happy to stay with my family and not be 200 days a year on tour like Udo Dirkschneider or something. And when I look to the amount of people Udo had on his last tour in the US, it wasn't so big, and everything must make sense, And for Gravedigger, it makes no sense in the moment to tour the US by their own.
Yeah. So the album Bone Collector. So any kind of concept behind the title of the record? I mean, it's got your typical cover. You got a Grim Reaper looking dude on there, some skulls. I don't think a Gravedigger album cover would look the same if you didn't have skulls and Grim Reapers and everything else in the front. So is there any like actual concept behind the title? Was there a reason you titled the album Bone Collector?
Yeah, there's a really small concept behind that, because we have the Reaper album, we have the Return of the Reaper album, and I don't want to call the new album The Reaper is Out of the Coffin or something like that. So that was the reason why we would be looking for a synonym for the Reaper, and then we found it Bone Collector. That sounds more brutal than the Reaper, and I love that.
Yeah.
No, it's not a concept CD. It's we have some different topics on it. Like Killing is My Pleasure. It's about a guy called Robert Kuklinski. He was a mafia killer in the US. He killed more than 200 people, and he went out to kill from like a 9-to-5 job. And we have The Rich, the Poor, the Dying is some critical stuff about people. A very small percentage in the world has so much money, and 80% of the people don't have any money, and there's a lot of poorness and everything. So, but we have also this typical Gravedigger lyrics like Kingdom of Skulls or Bone Collector. I love this Bone Collector chorus because he's a bone collector, grave dictator, death protector, and bone collector. That is more cliche you can't have on an album,
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the first two songs in the album, which you just talked about, those are two of my favorite tracks on the album. I think that what Tobias played on this record, to me, is it just, you never know what you're going to expect when you get a new guitar player. I mean, it's one of those things. When I started listening to the riffs and the actual songs and how heavy they were and how straightforward they were, it was great. It actually reminded me of your old days. It reminded me of the Reaper album a little bit, when, that album came out. And the songs, I'm not saying they sound the same, but obviously the production's a lot better. But yeah, it was more, you didn't do all these big epic intros and things that you've done on these concept albums. You just went straight back to the old days. And then
that was our intention to do that, no? And to make it simple again, because people, at the end, I want to entertain people, and we are not a social critical band like System of a Down or this guys, We want to entertain like Judas Priest or Saxon, making good songs, faster songs, slower songs, mid-tempo, but always in a simple way, like you expect from a German heavy metal band.
Yeah. The other song probably gets overlooked because it's the last song in the album, Whispers of the Damned.
That is more or less. Yeah, it's not an epic song, but
no,
I think that the lyrics are really, brutal, because it's about the commander of the concentration camp Auschwitz.
Yeah,
he also, like Robert Kuklinski, the mafia killer, he's working like a 9-to-5 job, sending people to the gas chamber, killing millions of Jews and other people, and then going back home, sitting there with his family, having dinner in the evening. Oh, what you done?
Yeah, like it's nothing. Like he just didn't like nothing happened.
Yeah, and the wife said, "Oh, what you did the whole day at your work? Oh, I put some people in the gas chamber, killed them. Okay, good, nice. So it's weird, and I love this song because the lyrics are so authentic, and I like also the song structure, because I'm a great fan of Ozzy Osbourne and his second solo album, Diary of a Madman, and we take this a little bit as a tribute to this song, when I talked to Toby, hey, let's write a song like this,
Mhm.
and then we came up with this song, and I think, yeah, it's amazing.
That's actually my favorite Ozzy album.
Yeah,
I just I
mine
just did
too.
a I just did an episode on that album. Yeah, it's my favorite Ozzy album, and it's interesting because it was so different from Blizzard of Oz. It really was, But yeah, I noticed a lot of the lyrics. I mean, there's a lot of very dark topics in this album, and what inspired you to write about? There aren't obviously not every one of them. It's not a concept record, but what inspired you to write about a lot of this stuff, especially a lot of this more brutal stuff that's happened, throughout history?
I have a dark soul, my friend. No, I'm such a peaceful guy, but I have this fantasies, not that I live these fantasies in my normal life, but I can put that to my lyrics. And I'm some kind of storyteller, like like writing a book or something, but in
Yeah.
a short way, And I love to deal with this kind of topics. So perhaps I'm weird. There's a song on this album also, which is a little bit autobiographic. It's Made of Madness.
Mm-hmm.
To do this job, to do this kind of music, you must be made of madness.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have this part in me who is mad about this kind of lyrics.
Yeah. You've always been in a lot of the lyrics. You've always written about something in history. The kind of the brutal part of the history, like, Knights of the Cross, again, about the Crusades, right? You wrote, when you listen to some, I was listening to Heart of Darkness not long ago, and I'm listening to some of these other albums, and really, there's a lot of history that you write about, and, more of the brutal side of things. But I've always had that. That's always been what you've done, right? And I'm listening to the lyrics of this album, and I'm like, man, Chris is, I'm thinking to myself, this is about some guy getting killed, but I can't figure out what inspired it until you just told me. But yeah, I mean, it's always been a trademark of yours with that, and I did definitely get a lot of that vibe from the album itself. Graveyard Kings, another great song. I was thinking about that just now. But overall, I think that you did I think this album's much better than the last one.
Okay, thank you.
In all
But
honesty.
but look to the other side. If you have a band like Halloween or like Freedom Call, they have this lucky side of life. This
Yeah.
and we are feeding the people the darker side of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this kind of topics from Freedom Call would not fit to the kind of music that Gravedigger is playing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think always I'm looking always at the lyrics fits to the kind of music we play, and perhaps we're playing a little bit darker kind of heavy metal, not death metal or something, but the darker side of heavy metal, and I
Yeah.
think it's the reason why Gravedigger sounds this way. But anyway, it's a
Yeah.
signature, sound.
It's interesting because I think the closest band I can think of that does write about some more brutal stuff would be Rage.
Yeah,
Because I remember PB telling me once about some of the stuff that he was writing about on one of the records they did, and I just remember it's kind of some similar topics, right? Because Running Wild's doing, they're writing about pirates and all sorts
yeah.
of other things and stuff like that. But yeah, I've noticed the creators writing about kind of probably similar stuff that you guys do, right? And it even though it's thrash, it's some similar topics there. So yeah, I mean, I think that the uniqueness of the band has always been your vocals, because you don't, like, if I listen to an album and you're on it, I already know it's going to be you, right? But I think your vocals, choirs, the songwriting style, you are correct when you said earlier, hey, you know what, we have our own signature sound, and I think that is what's part of what's kept this band alive for quite a long time.
For sure. Well, who is a bone collector? Peavy is a bone
I know
collector.
he is. I was just about to mention it. He is that. He did tell me that years ago. But yeah, that's why I brought that up, because he writes about a lot of the similar stuff. So I got to go into one other thing. 45th anniversary. Do you have any special celebrations planned? Do you have anything special planned for next year to
Yeah, we play
celebrate that?
The Wacken Open Air. We have some old school sets we will play with older stuff. Now on tour, we play a good amount of classics and a good amount of new stuff. But we also take one song on the next tour we never played live, I think 25 years or something. It is The Keeper of the Holy Grail.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that will be fun because we always play The Curse of Jack, which is it's a great. We modified it a bit to sing with the people, and it's such a great song live. But anyway, we play also the Kingdom of Skulls. We will start the show with Kingdom of Skulls with Jens Becker on stage playing his bass guitar, and yeah, well, I'm really happy to look in the future. We have so many great plans also after the anniversary year next year. So coming up with a new album, and yeah, we never stop thinking and playing.
So you're pretty optimistic. You're going to make it to 50 years.
I hope so, for
Yeah,
sure.
Judas Priest did it, right? I mean, they just
Yeah.
reissued. They reissued their first album, the 50th anniversary of Rock'n'Rolla. So I figured, if all of the people you grew up listening to can make it 50 years, I mean, why not you, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind of
it's not such a long time. 5 years is such.
no. I mean,
flying
it's
by. Time is flying by every time. If you have children, I think you have a son too, yeah?
I have two kids. Yeah.
Two kids. Two kids. If you after the birth of your kids, time's flying by. Whoop. 18
Yeah.
years, 20 years, like nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember it has flown by, because I will never forget when I read the press release of you celebrating your 20th anniversary back in 2000.
Yeah.
And it feels like that was yesterday, but then I realized it's going to be 25 years since that happened. So it's pretty. And then I'm looking at the amount of albums you've put out since then. I mean, it's been crazy. I mean, it's interesting because I was just talking about this a couple days ago. When I was talking about the late 90s is when there was kind of like a resurgence of this music. And I remember that's when Knights of the Cross came out, right? That's when Blind Guardian had Nightfall Middle Earth, right? You just had a lot of these albums that hadn't really made it over here yet, but you could see this resurgence, right? Hammerfall, their first album, and it out of nowhere did really well for them. And you guys were part of that, I think. And, that's kind of when I ended up really, that late 90s, mid to late 90s is when I ended up getting into the band.
For sure, it was a great time. We released in the 90s two of the most successful records ever, like To the War and Excalibur. No?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a guy who's looking back. I'm looking to the future. I want to reach some more goals with the band, and I want to keep this lineup stable. So yeah, I still have a couple of more years and records.
Yeah, speaking of that, I was just thinking about this the other day. When Excalibur came out, I remember before the album came out, you had back in the early days of the internet. I remember people got to vote on the concept. Remember, there was I think Knights of the Round Table. Yeah, two other concepts that people could vote for that you guys would write about. And if you do another concept album again, do you think of, hey, maybe we'll think of a few things and maybe let the fans vote on it and see what kind. I can do any of these, but let's see what they would like us to write about. Have you ever thought about doing that again?
No, not in the moment. I think that also the next one won't be a concept CD. I love to write these lyrics. I did in the moment. So like on Bone Collector, I'm so addicted to this part of lyrics. So I don't think that we write a concept. The next one will be not a concept, definitely not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So speaking of some history going on, you talked about the 80s and doing this. It was a much different time for the band. And I always said that there's a big difference between the material you came out with in the 80s and then when, the band was kind of, I mean, you did that like Digger project at one point, and then the 93, early 90s, the Reaper, Symphony, Symphony of Death, that EP and an album come out. What was it difficult for you to kind of restart the band at that point? Because I know the 80s were a rough time with with Noise Records and everything that had gone on with a lot of bands that were on that label at the time. But was it difficult to kind of come back and come out with those first couple records in the 90s? Because I know you went through probably some crazy times back then.
No, I don't think so, because we had this break after the Dig album,
mm-hmm.
and during this time, during the release of the Dig album and the album The Reaper was more or less 6 years, I think, something like that.
Sure.
And at the end, we had this Hawaii project, which was Gravedigger, but with another name. But we did some shows at this time. I think it wasn't a good time for a band like Gravedigger, but then Gun Records discovered the band again, and we did the Reap album, which came out with a bang, And I think since this time, the band has always delivered quality albums, different albums,
mm-hmm.
and I think that we have the status now that is more or less, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more, but we have the status. We can play around the world. We can make records. I think that is the most important thing, and that is the thing keeps us alive and moves us forward,
Absolutely. Well, hey, look, man, I commend you. It's funny because I listen to usually the band's past discography before I go and listen to the new record, or at least after I listen to the new record, I'll go back and listen to some of the past albums. But you're right. I was revisiting albums that I forgotten about. Like I forgot about The Last Supper, for example. I probably hadn't listened to that in quite a long time. But you are correct. I mean, the albums are very consistent and they are a lot different. The only thing that's similar, I would say, would be just the album covers having skulls and a Grim Reaper or something like that. But I don't think the albums wouldn't be Gravedigger if it didn't have a cover like that. That's just me.
For sure. The mascot, the Reaper, must be on the cover.
But anyhow, I do appreciate your time. I definitely love this record. It definitely is. It is a very, very good album. I would probably say in January 17th, I believe it comes out next year. So I think it's a great start to the year. It really is. And I really think you found a great guitar player in Tobias with the music that you've really written on this. But you've always had the one talent I think you've always had is you've always known the right guys to bring into the band. I think that's so important from the creative aspect. And obviously, it's not like these guys are in the band for a day, right? But you always find the right people musically to bring in. And I think that's one of the things I think you've done extremely well, over the course of this band's existence.
Thank you very much.
So my last question, Chris, any last words for the fans out there who are going to be checking out this interview?
Believe in heavy metal and stay metal and live metal, because that's our life, my friend.
Well, hey, it was great having you on, as always, and definitely a great album that you've done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Metal Command podcast. If you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video. And of course, if you are following me on any other form of social media, by all means, give me a like and a follow there. Thanks for watching. Stay metal.